just want to say thank you all for having me tonight. I'm looking forward to sharing all the details about this project. I have plenty of them. Hopefully we'll learn a lot here, and then we'll answer any questions you have at the end. So like Stephanie said, I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina. So if you have any questions or recommendations after that, let me know. But I grew up going to the French Broad River, similar to Waynesboro. It runs right through the city. So several memories, going fishing with my family or spending birthdays down there, swimming in the river. So it's pretty special, this project, to reconnecting the community with the river and Rockfish Run. So hoping to make that great connection and get people reconnected to the river and the habitat. So we're gonna dive in. I got plenty for you. This is gonna be Revitalizing EPA Brownfield. For reference, just a brownfield is just an abandoned site that has just lost its use over time, mostly due to contamination or just fear of contamination. So we're going to be running through that a little bit and how we were able to get into a space for recreation once again. So here we go. So a quick agenda, like I said, we're going to go through the background of the project. So we're going to start at the very beginning before DuPont ever came into Waynesboro, where the project came from, where all the funding came from, and get into the weeds of the design for both the for South River Preserve and Rockfish Run. I'm going to break down both. Then I'll have a quick wrap up and then leave time for questions. So we're gonna go here. So I know everyone in the room knows that we're in Waynesboro. Everyone here has probably been down the South River to know where we're talking about. Or anyone joining in online, we are located right here in the center of Virginia. It's kind of hard to see, but just west of 81, located in the mountains. Lots of mountains going on in this region. And then circling in here, closer into Waynesboro, we're going to be focusing on this red circle here near Constitution Park. South River runs directly through Waynesboro and flows from south to north. You'll recognize here Main Street and Broad Street, which we're just off of currently. But our project is mostly going to be Constitution Park, this area here, and then directly to the east is Rockfish Run. So jumping in a little further, here's an overall view, a nice drone shot of where we're looking at. So we're currently sitting, back here off Broad Street. And then the South River runs directly through here. Actually, I'll add some labels to make it even easier for everyone. So we're really going to be focused in on the South River Reserve area, which is the abandoned parking lot that Stephanie was talking about, and part of Constitution Park, which is down here. South River, it's hard to see in the corner, but I'll note that north is pointing towards the right of the screen there. So the South River is running from south to north. Rockfish Run runs in east to west. And then this kind of location down here where the former DuPont facility is located. And then for reference, this is the City of Waynesboro's QR code. You're welcome to scan. That was the website during construction and everything before that to just keep the community involved in what was happening out there, and it still has live updates. So go to the next one here. So I'm gonna flip us around the other way, and this will be kind of our view moving forward of what we're gonna be looking at. I flipped us around so north is now pointing towards the right side of the screen. So the South River is running down through here, South River Preserve, kind of same thing, and then our former DuPont plant. So this photo was taken in 1950. So this is when the DuPont plant was actually active and functioning and actively polluting the South River. As you can see, is right here on the banks, and then I'll go to current day, and this brings us a little bit more into where we're going to start into the project details. So we have the former DuPont plant, South River, Rockfish Run. Once again, this red boundary is our project boundary, an area that we're going to be focusing in on, and same thing, north is kind of pointing down towards this way. So start us out with our project details, just very abandoned parking lot, degrading. This is actually being in construction, so there's not typically an excavator out there. But just not getting a lot of use. The Greenway Trail runs right through there. You could use it for parking, but other than that, it was kind of a denuded area that we weren't getting a lot of use out of. It was also right around the South River. If you know, before there was a wooden fence, you can kind of see in the background there, but it was like a 10, 11 foot drop down to get to the river. So there really wasn't great access to get down to the river at all. It wasn't safe, a lot of eroding banks, stuff like that. So we were really looking at revitalizing this space and giving safe access down to the river itself. So we're gonna look at a timeline. So starting kind of overall this project is we got this site, but also we know that DuPont was releasing contaminants into the river. So we're kind of pairing that with our project goals and our grant funding. So I'm gonna step all the way through the timeline and look at kind of where the project came from and where we started. So how did we get here? So I'm gonna go all the way back, and I'd be very, very curious if anyone has ever heard of the Waynesboro oil hoax. So this is something interesting I learned along the way that I wanted to share with everyone. So we're going all the way back to 1894. We had so-called expert investigators came in and said that they had identified oil beneath the surface in Waynesboro and was like, oh, this is great. We're going to make so much money. This is going to be awesome. So they're like, okay, cool. We're sold. Like, let's go. So they build the derricks. They start drilling. Everything is good to go. Nothing's really coming up. Shocker. So one night, these so-called expert investigators come in and just dump oil into a hole. And for just a quick second, stocks skyrocket. They're like, oh, this is great. We found oil. This is really cool. And they very quickly realize there's actually not any. So this site gets abandoned. So this is actually the site of where DuPont moved in. So they had these existing derricks that were, that remained, along with a great well of fresh water. Anything in this time frame working near running water was very great for them. So you could use a mill for active power, but also if you had discharges, you could get them right into the river. A lot of times industry will also use water for a lot of cooling effects. So this was a great site for DuPont to actively move into shortly after all this happened for all these reasons. So that is why DuPont chose that site beside the South River. We're going to dig a little bit more now into the timeline, and I apologize in advance for all the words and all the acronyms, but we're going to power through. So right after that, DuPont moves in, and we start hitting the Industrial Revolution. So welcome to the boom. Business is booming, they move in, and they're just cranking stuff out. And so during this time, DuPont is creating rayon, which is like an artificial silk. So during the 20s, this was huge for fashion, but they were also producing a lot of dyes that they would use to dye the rayon, and then that dye would end up directly into the South River because there were no regulations at the time to make sure that that did not happen. So yes, mercury is used in the production of acetate fabric. And then this is one of the most memorable quotes from this project. It actually came from a former city planner, just saying that the river would run different colors depending on what dye they were using that day. So just imagining, the river turning different colors depending on what was happening, I was like, oh boy. So that's kind of all the way their production, 30 or 40 years of production while they're there. And then 1972, we get the Clean Water Act is passed. We actually just hit 50 years with that in 2022, so thank goodness for that. And also around the same time, DuPont discovers that they have mercury in their soils when they're expanding their plant. So this is all kind of coming about when the Clean Water Act comes in, and then we start moving it closer to like the late 70s and 80s, and the Virginia Department of Health bans fish consumption from the South River, from front oil and everything like that. And then, so we've discovered that we have mercury in the soils. We've discovered that they've been dumping a lot into the river over time. So this is where it starts like, what are we gonna do about this? What can we do to fix it? And what regulations or acts are in place to secure that these are cleaned up as appropriate? Because we can't just go dig mercury out of the river. So 1980, CERCLA is passed, or the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act. So this is just saying that if a company or someone releases contaminants into the environment, that they are the responsible party, and that they have, and like EPA can ensure their cooperation for cleanup. So this is where EPA really gets its teeth for getting DuPont to come out and cooperate and clean up this mercury out of the river. And then our fish consumption ban is replaced with an advisory around that time. And then from there, the State Water Control Board tells DuPont that they have to address the mercury in the river for the next 100 years of monitoring. So yes, we're not messing around. Around that same time, we also get the hazardous waste amendments are added to EPA's acts through RCRA, or Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So this makes EPA responsible for any hazardous waste. So this is saying, like, if a company is using any hazardous waste, they have to take care of it from start to finish, or cradle to grave, if you've ever heard that saying. So this makes sure that EPA can be like, okay, DuPont, you had the mercury, you have to take care of it from start to finish. So now that's in the river, you have to take care of it. So we get them on board through that, and then we get a corrective action portion. So then we can go in and make a plan for studying, identifying where everything is, and how we're going to clean it up and address it from there. So they start looking at everything, and then we put monitoring to work, and then 1999, we see that the levels are not declining as predicted. So we're looking at, DuPont stopped dumping contaminants in, so how are the fish and all the wildlife still getting infected or like consuming this mercury still. So they pulled together the South River science team to evaluate the mercury contamination of the banks. So discovering where it is, what concentrations, what are the best methods for taking care of it. So we'll move from there. And so with all that study, they realized that the pollutant is mostly in the river banks. So as it would run down the stream, it would settle out, get stuck in sediment, get stuck in the banks. And now that urbanization and everything is happening, we're losing a little bit more, we're getting more erosion in our stream banks. And so that mercury in soil is being released at a higher rate. So this is why we're still seeing a little bit more, not anymore, it's been taken care of. So from there, the science team pulls together some bank remediation areas and goes ahead and installs 5 of these. And they say, hey, this works, we're gonna keep it in place, keep the banks from moving. So for there, we have a method of keeping the banks and bank management areas, making sure they're staying in place. And now we have a plan together, we have a draft on-site measure study, and then from there, now that we have a plan of action, we end up getting NRDAR funding, which is the National Resource Damage Assessment and Restoration. So this is a settlement from DuPont, and the total of $42 million, not for this project specifically, I'll throw that out there, but saying that now that we have this way to fix the mercury contamination, DuPont is liable for this and has to help us fix it. So that is all of the information. Here's short, sweet, to the point. I don't know why Waynesboro got cut off, but Waynesboro oil hoax, DuPont moves in, lots of rayon and dye production, Clean Water Act comes in, and then finally the stage is set. So we figured out how we're gonna fix this. We have the funding for it, and that is where Anhold Associates, Landscape Architecture, and Timmons Group Civil Services comes in 2019 to present to get the project underway. So yeah, so with that's kind of our timeline and where we're sitting right now. So we've identified where the mercury is in all the banks. We've identified the areas. We've already remediated a lot of these bank management areas. And now we've identified the South River Preserve as just a space as a brownfield is not being utilized due to fear of contamination. So now we can move in and look at some best case options and use that NRDAR settlement that has its own objectives to apply this project. So we're gonna focus on the South River Preserve for now, and then I'll talk about Rockfish Run after that. So to start, this is our master plan. So this is kind of high level. So this is how we start a lot of our projects. We'll look at like a conceptual plan, a feasibility study. This is where we pull together, what are our objectives from the grant, the city, stakeholders involved, and just get a general idea of what we're looking at and what could be feasible in this area. So this is kind of the first rendition of everything Anhold Associates and Timmons Group pulled together along with the city. So you can see here, South River, that same view we were looking at before. North is pointing to the right side of the screen, and then the South River is running from south to north, and then Rockfish Run comes in here. But this is where that abandoned parking lot used to be. So you're seeing a lot more green space, a lot more utilized space, a lot more forest, a lot more habitat, ecosystem restoration, stuff like that we're looking for. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the design team. I know we've talked a lot about this already, but we couldn't have done it with all these people involved and all the stakeholders. But yes, Waynesboro, Anhold Associates, which was the principal in charge of this project, and Timmons Group was a sub. So we helped with a lot of the stormwater engineering and stream restoration pieces as well. And then we had a biologist come in, and I learned a lot about birds in the project. I have a lot of information about birds coming up as well, but that was a big piece of this, was getting the birds new habitat. And shout out to Summit as well, which was the construction services on this project and completed it for us. Alrighty, so just like any project, when we're gonna start, we like to sit down and look at a broad view of what we're looking at. So you're gonna be looking at what are our objectives from our funding. So we're looking at this NRDAR settlement, National Resource Damage Assessment and Restoration. So this is saying that we need to assess and restore the ecological benefits back to pre-contamination baseline. And then I mentioned CERCLA again, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act. So this is saying that they need to clean this up. So they're saying they put all those into act. Those are kind of what our baseline is for this project. And they have this restoration plan that the science team pulled together for us. So this is kind of the base of where we have to start, because we have to meet these objectives in order to use the settlement from DuPont. So from there, these are the objectives that were laid out in the NRDAR, or the plan, I guess. And so these are the things that we're going to address and we're going to try to implement in this denuded area that we can't use anymore. So this is a pre-existing or existing photo. So the South River is just off screen there, but this is the Greenway Trail and then just right beside this abandoned parking lot. But we're going to be looking at adding a lot more habitat, fish habitat, recreational spaces, river access, and this water quality BMPs, which I'll get into in just a second. Along with looking at where our funding is and what our objectives are for the project, we need to look at the stakeholders involved. So this is going to be at the end of the day when we go home, who is going to be using this? The community, the city of Waynesboro. Obviously, we have to look at the trustees, but also, as we talked about before, there are a lot of people out there fishing. I swear every time I go out there, I see at least 3 or 4 fly fishing. Also, kayakers that use the river, bird experts, and then looking again at like you guys have your festival next or this coming weekend, I guess. So looking at who's going to use this space, the event organizers, if you have schools going down there for educational pieces, like what is going to make the most sense for the people that are going to use this space. So something we have to keep in mind as we go through design. And then the last piece, just like any other project in Virginia or anywhere in the US, there are sets of stormwater management regulations that we have to go through. This is pretty standard for ours, and I apologize in advance. I have learned that we are a group that love acronyms, and I tried to break them out as much as possible to make it easy. So starting at the top, everything trickles down from EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, and so they set out this National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So that is the act that is in charge, and those get passed down to the state level. So these come down to the Virginia Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which we call VIPDs. So from there, that is kind of the teeth in the state code of where the stormwater and erosion sediment control regulations come from. So from there, if you have like an urbanized area or a locality, so like City of Waynesboro, City of Richmond, any other locality in between, they're going to be a Virginia Stormwater Management Program. So this means that they have to control their stormwater if they have new development, redevelopment, something like that. So there are 3 pieces that they have to look at when they're implementing this program, and those specifically look at point source pollution and non-point source pollution. So point source pollution is like you can literally point at where it's coming from. So that would be like your industrial discharge. So you say like they're producing waste, it's coming out into the river, we have to regulate that. And then same thing with construction activities, be pretty obvious if they're doing something wrong. But the biggest piece is your non-point source pollution. So you're thinking about this is anytime it rains and it just picks up anything in the water and carries it with it. So that is where you get a MS4, which is a mouthful, but it is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So this is just saying that you have a separate storm sewer system, separate from like your wastewater and sanitary sewer system. But storm sewer goes directly to natural waterways. So if it goes into a curb cut or any sort of inlet for stormwater, it doesn't get cleaned. So anything that gets in it like oil or trash or dirt, stuff like that will end up in a natural waterway. So we're saying that we want to kind of prohibit as much of that non-point source pollution as we possibly can. So that is where this VSMP, Virginia Stormwater Management Program, and the localities come in to take care of that. So we're gonna go to the next one. So as part of that MS4, there are 6 minimum control measures. And I'm sorry, I could do a whole other presentation just on this. So if you want any other information, the DEQ website is fantastic. If you just type in like Virginia DEQ and do stormwater, it'll give everything you need to know. The one we're looking at for today is the post-construction runoff piece. So this is looking at you have to control your stormwater after you construct it. So you go and you put a parking lot, all your water's gonna run off much faster than it would have before. So we gotta make sure we slow it down before it reaches the natural waterways. So that is something that we had to implement on this project. There's another piece of this is we need to look at the actual nutrients that are beginning into our waterways. And there are 3 pollutants of concern. They are nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, and I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a little bit. But we have to consider what those are going to do to our environment with each project. And so DEQ has come up, Department of Environmental Quality for Virginia has come up with a method. It is called the VRM. Oh no. Okay, we're back. That one is the Virginia Reduction Runoff Method. And so that is where you can plug in all your land cover and all your new development information, and it'll tell you how much nutrients you need to take out. So we'll use that for our construction of the South River Preserve. One other piece we'll look at is this BMP, or a best management practice. And then a best management practice is also just a stormwater management facility. So it's anything that's going to capture the stormwater, it's going to slow it down, and it's going to help trickle out those nutrients. So this looks at both quantity of water and quality of water. So we're going to go, and hopefully that doesn't happen again. Okay, we're good. So just a quick overview before I get a little bit more into the details of our design itself and the iterative process. So this is looking at existing conditions, South River here in the middle, so we'll be focusing down here in this parking lot. So we're trying to figure out how we can put those NERDAR objectives, along with the stakeholders, along with the regulations in this area and make the most of it for the city. And there we go. So the first one we're going to focus on is this water quality BMP. We'll go to here. Ooh, excuse me. So this is where we get into the Virginia reduction runoff method. So as part of this, you have to study your existing conditions versus your proposed conditions. And this looks at your existing land cover. So as you can see, oh, it's a little hard. This one on your right here is the, I guess your left, sorry. This is the abandoned parking lot, and that is all impervious area, along with the river, which is water, and then managed turf. So there are kind of the darker green is forest, the lighter green is managed turf. If you think of managed turf, that's like your typical lawn grass. It's something that gets mowed regularly. And then your forest or open space is something that you leave pretty natural, so it's gonna be a little bit more dense vegetation. So for this project, our stormwater compliance strategy was just clearly and straightforward land conversion. So luckily, just converting this from a parking lot that was impervious to more of like a natural landscape gave us all of the credit and the reduction that we needed, because it would infiltrate the water, it would slow it down, it would take the nutrients out rather than running it off the parking lot. So that was our compliance strategy for this guy, was just changing it into more of a natural system. So that's pretty straightforward, easy peasy. And then you get into floodplain compliance. So if you know, FEMA regulates all of these, and any major waterway is going to have a flood zone mapped on it. So this is all found online. You can find them in a mapper on FEMA's website. So this is pulled from theirs. And this red line is our project boundary. So as you can see, we are all in a floodway. And all the floodway means is that it is an area that floods very regularly, and you cannot cause any impacts to this flooding. So you have to have a no rise achieved if you're going to develop in the floodway. So saying like if thinking like you had like a box of water and you put a ball in it, the water's gonna rise. So you gotta make sure if you put something in it, it doesn't cause a rise in the water level whatsoever. So this is where we start getting into an iterative process between what we have for our stormwater compliance and our objectives, trying to figure out how to make it balance with the floodplain compliance piece. So there we go. So this is where we start juggling between the two, and it becomes a very iterative process in design. So you're thinking, if we're gonna put more roughness in here, the water is gonna slow down and back up, which causes a floodplain rise. So I guess the best way to describe this is existing conditions. You had an impervious parking lot, so you imagine water running off that, it's just gonna go. Nothing's gonna slow it down, it's going very, very fast. As soon as you flip that to natural vegetation, grass, forest, whatever else, it's gonna slow the water down and it's gonna back it up, which causes a rise in your floodplain. So you have to try to find a balance between your lowering your grading to getting your roughness coefficients in for modeling between existing and proposed, and find the balance between this so we can meet all of our objectives. So this is kind of what we're looking at when we implement the master plan into our VRM proposed over there. So lots of green, lots of forest, which is really going to slow the water down, which became difficult over time to manage both. So at the end of the day, we worked with Anhold Associates very closely to kind of get a goal that would work for both of our needs, everything, and you can tell that it changed quite a bit. We'll focus on kind of, oh no. There we go. The Westwoods over here, we had to condense down a little bit the forested condition, the roughness, just to get our floodplain compliance. We also dropped the river theater very, very close to the river, which is great for river access, but it also was great additional benefit for our floodplain compliance, is that we're connecting the river to more floodplain space. So it was a little bit of both there. So you can see from the master plan, from the original planning, and then digging into the details, this changed a little bit, but we still have our West Woods, we still have the East Woods over here at Rockfish Run, as well as the Great Lawn that we still have as recreational space to use. So yeah, that is everything for the South River Preserve. On the design side, so that's kind of where we started to look at, we still have all our recreational areas and everything else in place for the water quality BMPs. So that is just everything, best management practices for the stormwater portion itself. And then now we are going to look at everything else. So we'll look at all of the bird habitat, all the fish habitat, looking at the river itself, this piece of land protection and property acquisition, and then the river access that I was talking about. So this is where we got to have a little more fun with everything. So this land protection, luckily, most of the project or the piece that we worked on was on city-owned lands. So this just makes sure that nobody's going to come in and disturb those mercury banks anymore. We can make sure that they are safe and they're going to stay in place for years to come. And same thing with this bank management area. So I mentioned this before in the timeline. When they were kind of studying what to do with these banks, they went ahead and installed 5 of these bank management areas, and these are secured in place, and those cannot move. But those were near our site, so we actually could not touch those banks in place. Those had to stay completely alone, so we couldn't use those at all. But those are already been installed, and they're still functioning as they should. And then same thing, we installed these boulder revetments along the river at the bottom, same thing to keep the river bank in place to keep mercury from coming out. And it is a qualified stream restoration practice that we used. So that's that piece. And then we're moving into more of the habitat pieces here. So this is where we had the biologists come in and start talking about there are 113 different bird species identified in this area. And so our huge goal for this was to get the birds off of the banks. And this is one of my favorite quotes is from Ann Hold, and he said there are mercury-infused spiders in the banks. And I was like, I never thought I would hear that phrase, but here we are. So the goal, and we're thinking the spiders or insects are living in these banks, they're getting into the mercury, and all of a sudden the birds are eating them, and it's bioaccumulating through the food chain. So our goal was just to give the birds areas out of the South River, out of the banks, get them clean water, get them clean habitat. So we really wanted to pull them off the river as much as we could and provide these planting, the canopy, the forest, native species, stuff like that. And moving in. We've talked a lot about fishing already, but here's some more. They're always down there. There are 50 different species that have been recorded in the South River, 40 of which are native. And then part of the portion of the river is actually stocked with trout. So we wanted to really appeal to this and try to get as much habitat as we could in there. We couldn't touch as much of the banks, but we were able to get some in-stream habitat placed. So this is a little bit from our plan sheet here. And our goal is to provide some shelter, food, and improve fishing, but also get some flow regime changes in here. So if anyone has been down there before, there was this cross vein here that was existing. There were a couple of them that were installed several years ago, and they're not in the best condition. We went ahead and left them in place and placed a second one like this. So the goal of the cross vein is it sits lower in the middle and it goes and angles up on the side, so it really forces the water back into the middle of the river. And that just makes sure that the erosion, the high shear stress is not going towards the banks of the river and keeping it intact. We also left a couple gaps in the cross vein, and those would be for our kayakers. They were a little worried that they were gonna have a shallow depth over those rock structures and not be able to get through, so we left those spaces and the gaps for high water for them. A couple other pieces we left are converging rock clusters. We added these in along with woody debris. So these converging rock clusters will add shelter for fish. The wood will provide also habitat for microinvertebrates and anything the fish will eat, as well as break up the flow regime of the river itself, get a little more dissolved oxygen back into the river. And then, there we go. So existing conditions. Now the fun part, we get to look at pictures before and after and see everything that we kind of changed and implemented all of these goals into the project itself. So we're looking same parking lot, hard to get down to the river, probably someone down there fishing. And then, so before you've seen this photo, just degrading parking lot, not much to do with it. So Summit was out there. First things first, we got to get rid of all this asphalt. They chunked it, milled it, took it off site, got rid of that first. And then I vaguely mentioned this before, but there's about a 10, 11 foot gap between where that parking lot sat and where the river was. So we had a lot of dirt to move out of there. So this is, you can kind of see the former DuPont plant there in the background, but you can kind of see someone standing here in orange, and then down there is where the river is. So they had a whole bunch of dirt to take out. And across the city of Waynesboro being very active with this, but there was another project nearby that needed soil. I will promise it was not contaminated with mercury, and they were able to take it somewhere else and to utilize it on a different site. So we're able to use that. And then I enjoy this picture a lot. So I'm actually standing closer to Rockfish Run looking back towards South River Preserve, and this is where you can really tell how high, and like you didn't have any access to the river before. It was very hard to get down to. This is a building with a mural on it for people that are in town or have been to Waynesboro before. And then flash forward, this is during construction. This is in the winter time, so obviously they're not done yet, but you can see just how much dirt we took out of there to get this river access into place, and how much more we're opening up this space for people to utilize. And then we'll look at this one, and shout outs to whoever has a drone in Waynesboro, because I found these on Facebook. And if you're here, please send me more photos. But they just happen to go out there and take those. Like, these are incredible. Thank you so much. So thank you, whoever did that. But yes, you got the little person fishing down here, but you can really see the improvements that we put in. This is before we got all of our plantings in. So you can really see the fine grading and the detail that went into this. So you can see, let me go to the next one here. This would be your west woods overlooking. So we have stormwater swales and channels that carry stormwater down to the river itself. So this will be part of the meadow area and part of the west woods that is now planted with tublings. And then our boulder revetments there, and our river theater area as well. And then the nice, meandering greenway that goes through and connects now. And you can walk straight down to the river itself. So yeah, there's a couple of the improvements down at the South River. And then this is kind of the after. Looking at it from the parking lot now, so we have our nice stormwater trees planted, DuPont in the background, and this is our meadow that is actively growing. A couple more photos down on the river, the boulder revetments. And then this is the crossbeam that I was talking about in the South River. So on, your left is the existing, so you can see it was kind of falling apart, not functioning. You can also see it down here in the shot along with ours that is really forcing that water to go towards the center of the river itself. And that is all I have for South River Preserve. So just looking at all those NERDR objectives that we had, stormwater compliance, as well as looking at our stakeholders and really getting that space utilized again and revitalizing that brownfield that previously was not used for much. Bless you. And then now we're going to pair into Rockfish Run, which is a stream restoration project, and kind of why we got included in Rockfish Run. So it is just on the other side of the South River. It dumps directly into the South River, and it was already included in the City of Waynesboro master plan. So it's something that was easy to go ahead and tack on while we were also at it, and it was really great to have one contractor complete all the work at once and minimize the impacts within waterways while we're at it. And then we were able to implement a lot more habitat in this area, especially with the goal of getting the birds off the banks of the South River, as well as fish habitat and nutrient reduction. So we were able to accomplish that with the stream restoration as well. We were also able to pair this with Stormwater Local Assistance Fund grant, which is SLAF for short. So you can use that from Virginia DEQ for any of these stormwater management projects to reduce pollutants to the Chesapeake Bay. Another thing with this is the Chesapeake Bay TMDL credit, which I'm going to go into a little bit more in just a second. So let's take a step back from all the master planning here. So there's an overarching goal of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, total maximum daily load. To break it down, it is a pollution diet. So this is saying that the Chesapeake Bay can receive so much contamination or pollutants in a certain, yearly time frame and still be considered healthy. So in 2010, EPA established this TMDL, total maximum daily load, and it covers 7 different states. It is one of the largest of its kind, and it is, I think Chesapeake Bay is like 64,000 square miles. It is enormous. And so it was impaired for having too much nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment coming to it, and it was destroying the Chesapeake Bay, which was considered a national treasure when it was enacted in this TMDL. So it covers 7 states. They phased this, and starting in 2014, and by 2025, we were supposed to have a lot of our goals accomplished. I'll say that Virginia is along its way. It has met its sediment goals, and it's about 80% nitrogen, about 62% phosphorus. So we're on our way to reaching these Chesapeake Bay goals in Virginia. So we're going to go a little bit more into depth on this. So the TMDL is mostly for protecting the natural waterways, protecting recreation for the people that want to use the Chesapeake Bay, protecting the wildlife and also the economy that revolves around it. You know, people that oysters or fish in these areas. So we want to protect these. So with the Chesapeake Bay, you have all of the drainage that comes from these 7 states ends up down there, and it can take, I was saying, the stormwater management, the stormwater that runs off all of our urban sites ends up in natural waterways. So the total maximum daily load allocated to each state, how much pollutant they could release per year, and they were trying to get it back down to that threshold. So each locality has to do its part, more or less, to get a reduction in these credits. So City of Waynesboro has one, City of Richmond, anywhere in Virginia that has an urbanized VSMP stormwater management program has to participate in the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. So stream restoration is a great practice for this and is efficient and is cost efficient per linear foot. So we are keeping the sediment from reaching the banks and reaching the bay eventually. So we're going to dive a little bit into why stream restoration. One of the biggest reasons we do stream restoration is for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. I kind of alluded to this before. A lot of urban areas, so watershed-wise, so you have a drainage area that comes to your natural water system. So you think before it was developed, before urbanized areas, it's a nice forest. So rain comes down, it hits trees, it infiltrates, it slows the water down before it ends up in our natural system. You go and urbanize it, it runs off buildings, it runs off parking lots very, very quickly. So you're getting a lot more water and you're getting it a lot more quicker. It's getting a lot quicker. So it's shooting into these natural systems, which is causing a lot of effects on them. So you're getting a lot of over-widening, the stream is dropping, you're getting a lot of erosion on the banks because this is just too much water for it to handle and it's coming too fast. So you're getting a lot of degraded systems from this. So it starts to drop in elevation and it can't reach its natural floodplain anymore. So there's nowhere for the water to spread out and slow down, and it starts to just continue to channelize. So the same thing with Chesapeake Bay, which is why I was getting so much sediment in these urban areas. It's carrying all the sediment and all the nutrients downstream with it, through the James, through the Appomattox, getting it down to the Chesapeake Bay. So a big reason for stream restoration is we can stabilize these banks and make sure they're not eroding anymore and they can function with these new velocities and flows from the urban areas. We also look a lot, especially for Rockfish Run, there were a lot of utilities exposed. So this is actually a photo from Rockfish Run, very over-widened. I believe this is a water line that was over it or a sewer line. We're also looking at property loss. This is in a city park, but we're losing a lot of property over there. But in most stream restoration projects, these can be in residential areas and people don't want to lose their backyards to the stream or trees. Same thing, we already talked about stormwater discharge. This causes a lot of unstable stream systems. You got a lot of deposition. It's hard for them to function. This can also suffocate habitat ecosystems. So you have too much sediment dumping into it can cause adverse effects for habitat, for fish, yes. So let me go to the next one here. So how do we fix this? So what is the best way to establish stream restoration? So there are a couple techniques. The biggest one that we use is natural channel design. So this is one that I've been to a lot of training for, but we really go out into the river, into the system we're going to be working in and take and collect as much data as we can. We want to know a lot about the stream. We want to know what's getting to it, how much flow is getting to it, how it wants to react. There's a classification system. It is based on slope. It's based on drainage area. It's based on land type, land cover, and landscape type. So you can really figure out what the stream wants to be. There is a natural succession of streams, so you're thinking nature will figure itself out, which it will, if you leave it alone for long enough, which is over hundreds of years. But unfortunately, in these urbanized areas, it just doesn't have enough time to fix itself. So where we come in is we figure out what it wants to be, and we help it along its progression to get it back to a stable place so it can function as an ecosystem again. So we do a lot of that. We also use stream structures, all natural materials, so rock and wood, which you'll see out on Rockfish Run, just to keep it stable and keep it from moving in these higher flow events. Same thing with oxbow ponds, which is a great addition to Rockfish Run for the additional habitat and those NERDAR objectives. We use a lot of vegetation, all native vegetation, and that is what holds your stream in place. And we use a lot of live stakes, so there's a lot of willows out there on Rockfish Run. Some design constraints, especially that we see in urban areas, are going to be space limitations. So if we're working in residential areas, we can't take over people's backyards. We also deal with flooding concerns. There are utility conflicts. We can't move every utility that crosses the stream, so this can constrain us laterally, looking at how far the stream bed can go, as well as tie-in locations, so looking at if there's roads, if there's culverts, or you're tying into the South River at the bottom. So this is a quick aerial look at Rockfish Run itself. So north is kind of pointing straight down at this point. This is DuPont Boulevard, and the stream is running from east to west directly into, the South River over here. So as you can see, very straightened, not a very natural system anymore. We've lost a lot of vegetation on the banks over time, and it's kind of hard to see from this, but these banks range from anywhere between 6 and 10 feet high. And so it's just a trench that goes straight down. It's not very healthy anymore, very unstable. So it was a very good pairing for Waynesboro to go ahead and tack this on to South River Preserve while we were over here so we can stabilize this and make sure that more additional sediment is not dumping into the new construction that we just did in the South River. So looking at all of that, this is our final design. Kind of that same layout we were just looking at. This is DuPont Boulevard over here, and then South River is down at the end. There is a 40-inch sycamore tree right here that we are going to save as part of the park. We wanted to leave that tree there as a tree of significance, and so we were able to leave that in and go ahead and create as much floodplain space as we could in here. So reconnecting the stream channel with its original, or part of the original floodplain, and getting it as much floodplain relief as possible. So as higher flows come through, it'll bank out, it'll spread out, and it'll slow down, which will also drop out any trash, any sediment, any debris that the flow might be carrying from its drainage area. So we get as much as we can up in this area, add some sinuosity or some, wiggles back into the stream alignment. And then once we get down here, I want to say there are 3 or 4 different utility crossings. And once we get under the power line, you can really open up the floodplain here and get a lot more relief in that floodplain, a lot more areas, as well as implement these oxbow ponds, which I'm going to highlight a little bit. So the oxbow ponds, you can just put in the middle of the floodplain, but they're going to hold water all the time, but they will get groundwater recharge from the bottom, and the goal of these is to bring that groundwater up, and these will create really nice habitat areas of clean water, which will also get recharged from the main reach here and tie back in there. So they're going to get clean water continually and nice shallow water to get the birds, and that's migratory songbirds, back into this area and get them out of the banks and stop them from eating mercury-infused spiders. So this was really great for those NERDAR objectives once again. So we're looking at adding bird habitat, fish habitat, as well as just additional space for nutrient reduction. Yeah, so we have some before and after photos here. So the one on this side was the existing conditions. You can see we have a stormwater outfall that comes in, just very straight, very steep banks, not a lot going on here. And then looking at our after photo, all these little tubes are just protecting our native plantings. So after a year, once our trees are big and strong, we'll remove those. Those are not gonna be there forever. But you can see how many trees we're planting out here and how much of this we expect to be grown and full of vegetation over time. We are adding in, there's that 40-inch sycamore tree, adding sinuosity back into the channel and adding our stream structures in. So once again, this is a before and then an after shot. So before, this is a water line that is encased that was fully exposed and the stream was running underneath it. As well, this is a sewer line that was fully exposed, and then we also have a stream outfall right there. So you can see in the after photo, we're now looking upstream towards DuPont Boulevard, but those utilities are completely buried now. The sewer line was also encased to make sure it does not have any damage in the future. So hopefully those will stay under the stream for years to come. And then this is just a now picture. I took this probably earlier this month, looking upstream, but this is where you get into the oxbow pond, so you can really see how far we opened up this floodplain to get more space. As you see, we have geese. So we have some birds coming into our oxbows, and they're figuring out we got some additional habitat up here. These are the oxbow ponds and where it ties back into the main reach. And then this is just further downstream again. So this is where we have some of those cross veins once again to channelize the flow. And then Rockfish Run dumps into South River Preserve down here. So overall, just widening out, get a lot more floodplain space, getting nutrient reduction, adding more habitat in. So yeah. So that is everything that I had for this. 1 oil hooks, 1 master plan, 2 grants, 5 regulations, 6 design teams, 9 constraints in 90 years. So 90 years later, after all the contaminant has been dumped in, we were able to go back into this area and revitalize this brownfield and give it back to the community and give it back to, people that want to use the river, use the space, and make it something that people would enjoy for years to come and have no mercury contamination. So with that, I will take any questions. Oh my goodness.
The proposed location for the History Museum, is the proposed location for the History Museum, isn't that in the floodplain?
No, actually, I was actually looking at her map. I don't know if you can go back to the map. I could show you exactly where it is.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
master plan?
The floodplain map, it was very early on.
Yeah.
You had
Oh, God. Okay, hold on.
with the floodway.
There are 61 slides. That's
Yeah.
Number 9.
Sorry.
Nah, I don't know how to do this easily, but yeah, I did actually notice where it was. The parking lot, there it is.
That's it.
Perfect, excellent. So if you look at the upper left corner, yeah, maybe a
Yeah, there we go.
would help.
Pointer.
It's working. So this is the Main Street Bridge. This is the Broad Street Bridge. This about here is where the Farmers Market Pavilion is.
Right.
This is the parking lot. And you can see that the upper corner of this parking lot where the building is proposed to be is outside of the floodplain.
Nailed it. Yes. And
If you look closely at the legend, it actually says 0.2% annual chance of flood. So it's not that it won't flood at all, but it certainly is well outside of a regular floodplain. And in terms of the design of the building, that's something we're going to have to take into account. Obviously, we're not going to have a basement in that building, and they're going to lift the elevation of that foundation outside of the floodplain. So it was a very good question, and I was watching.
yeah. Oh, yeah. For reference on this, the blue is the 100-year floodplain or a 1% annual chance that you'll get a storm that big. And then the orange is the 500-year floodplain or the 0.2% chance that you'll get that annual event. And for reference, Hurricane Helene in Asheville was between like a 500 and 1,000-year storm. So that's how big you're getting into.
I will say during Helene, we saw SRP, which was fully constructed at that time. It was functioning as planned, where the water from the South River filled the channel, and you saw it in the wooded area, in the meadow space, filled up. It was maybe a foot or two below cresting onto the parking lot area. But the whole River Theater area had filled, and it really slowed the water down. So we didn't have a lot of damage or anything in that area because of what we had just completed.
Oh, hi. Well, as soon as the habitat becomes attractive, the animals want to come and live there. When they even first started doing some work there, the beavers came in. So beavers, muskrats, raccoons, possums, otters, deer, all of these are not birds. And they will want to come. And so who does the wildlife management?
I'm assuming that'll be under parks.
Yes. Parks does manage our wildlife now. We now, in our current situation across the city, there's a lot more stress happening. We have a lot of development happening, and we're starting to see that pressure in our park spaces with more deer damage and those sorts of things. We're always on the lookout for beaver and those sorts of things. So we have a plan in place to deal with them, invasive species as well. But it is changing, and it is going to become more and more, but hopefully we'll be able to live, together in that space a lot more than we'll have to be dealing with challenges.
Yeah. And a lot with our stream restoration, we get a lot moving in. We do see beavers quite often. They're lovely in the right habitat, but something of this scale would probably need to relocate.
Yes. Okay. You said you have a baseline that you're trying to achieve that was pre-pollution.
Yes.
That was part of your things. So one, how did you determine that baseline? Two, are you going to grade? How are you going to, in the future, see how these improvements affect the baseline? And what are those things that you are monitoring?
Oh boy. So unfortunately, that was all the work that was done before us. So that was all part of the monitoring and corrective action plan that was put in place by the South River Science team. So they were the ones that were tasked with identifying where the mercury was and how we could address it. So that was all done as part of that restoration plan. Let me see if I can find it. Oh boy, here we go again. Sorry. Oh wait, there we go. This restoration plan environmental assessment for the South River, this outlines everything that they were able to identify in the field, where the most contaminants were, and then how they were going to address them. So that was all before this was done, and we did not work in any areas where mercury had been identified. So we were able to stay out of that area and just revitalize the brownfield itself.
But how are you going to judge whether your improvements affect that levels?
So yeah, we didn't affect anything that had the mercury itself. We do monitoring as part of our construction. So for stream restoration, as part of DEQ and the U.S.
Old ice cream construction, you have big machines right in the middle of the creek and the mud flow going right by them,
Yeah, that is a good point. I definitely saw when the construction was going on, there was a lot of turbidity added to the river, but I think
Yes.
the response would be that it's a temporary change and that
Yes,
over the
they
long
do
term,
get-
hopefully it's better.
Yes, they're permitted from that for DEQ and U.S. Army Corps. As well, new regulations have just come out for turbidity testing to hold the contractor liable for during construction to make sure that they are not producing turbidity downstream. So this is a new compliance strategy that they have just now implemented.
And they did put curtains across the river during that time. It's just because you are digging into the bed, it does let loose some of the discharge, and it was getting under the curtains.
One of the objectives, I don't know whether this is one Josh was talking about, was specific to the preserve itself, and it sounded like you were trying to recreate conditions for the habitat and the wildlife that was based on a baseline. Did I misunderstand that?
That was just for contaminants.
Okay.
It was just for the getting it back to for the baseline for the contaminants.
For the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment?
For mercury,
Oh, for mercury. Oh, okay.
yes, yeah.
That was work separate from this project.
Gotcha. Other questions? Yes, Dave?
Kind of two. Did you find that the work you did actually lowered or shrank the size of the floodplain in the downtown area? I really noticed that after Helene, it slowed it down simply because there was a large buildup of sand along the river, even below where you've done all the work where the parking lot was. Has it also shrunk other areas, or does it just pretty much meet what the floodplain was prior to when you did this work?
It's mostly prior, so we model upstream and downstream of our site. They're all based on FEMA cross sections, and so we run both existing and proposed conditions to make sure we're meeting the no rise. It might change it close up in stream and downstream, but I wouldn't expect it to be very, very different.
And then
those
my other
areas.
question is, are you involved at all with the Loth Spring natural area that's going on?
I am not. Yeah, Stephanie might be, but
Do you have any estimation of how many pounds or how many tons of mercury contaminated the ground? How many years this went on?
I do not have any numbers on the mercury, unfortunately. I was excited because I had the nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment numbers pulled.
And given the fact that I'm learning how you're dealing with this, there will be, unless you mine the ground away, there will always be mercury in the soil here. The game plan is not to let it leach out into the river,
Correct.
and
At least for those bank management areas that were identified with the high contaminants, that it would cause more issues to release it or to move it.
how far downstream has this been contaminated?
It goes pretty far down the South River.
And this is beyond the area you showed on the map up there.
Yes.
And this will be with us in perpetuity unless we mine away tons and thousands of tons of dirt and take them somewhere else. There's no way to get the mercury out of the dirt, is there?
Yes. There's not a good way to get it out without causing a whole bunch of adverse effects to the river itself and to habitat and private property.
I've asked the same question
Yeah.
about how much mercury has been released to the river. Nobody has a good answer to that because they weren't keeping records for that at the time. I have heard some estimates, and they are in the 90,000 pounds range, but that's, really a guess, a swag. And you're right, mercury doesn't go away. The only thing that we can do is try to isolate it from the river, which is what those riverbank management areas are designed to do. They remove the heaviest concentrations, and then they cap what remains. And they use actually some biochar, which is an absorbent material, to prevent it from continuing to leach to the river. But you're right, it's never going to go away. We're going to have the legacy of mercury for a long time. The hope is that over time, if we can isolate the highest concentrations, we reduce the concentration in the fish, which is the target, because that's where the consumption advisory exists and where the exposure can exist to humans. I hope that answers a little bit of your question. Other questions? One in the back.
I can barely see back there.
I was just wondering what the timeline is going forward, especially for stewardship of the plantings on the West Bank.
So South River Preserve wrapped up about a year ago. So we do a 1-year warranty on the plantings. So that's actually coming up this spring. We're going to check out all the tubulings, make sure we're hitting the correct survival rate. And then Rockfish Run just wrapped up last month. And then that will be monitored for at least the next 5 years with DEQ and us to make sure that the stream is functioning as intended. And then after that, it'll be on parks to keep an eye on those invasive species or anything else that moves in.
Maybe time for one or two more questions. There's a question in the back here.
I was wondering about the oxbow ponds, and you said they were fed by groundwater, is that correct? So
Yes.
did you find specific place where there was higher groundwater, or how did you decide on those places were, and you just dug down until groundwater was coming up? Tell me a little bit about identifying them, locating them, and constructing them.
So the biggest thing for this was just our space constraint. So we couldn't really put them at the top, but we had a little bit more room down at the bottom of the floodplain to implement those oxbow ponds. This is pretty typical with stream restoration. We have room, so you're already getting groundwater recharge into your natural system. So that's in your stream channel where the groundwater intersects the land itself. So we knew that we had the groundwater there. Usually with stream restoration, we're bringing the channel back up to where it used to be, and that'll also bring the groundwater up with it. And so at these oxbow ponds, it gives us a little bit of pool, because these things are about 4 or 5 feet deep, where the groundwater will hit those as well as the stream channel beside them. So since we're so close to the river and the natural waterways, your groundwater table is already right there at the surface. So this is just interacting them with a lot more to get the groundwater into those pools, and it'll bubble up and go into the stream system. So yeah, we'll get a lot of cold water recharge too at the bottom. We like them to be pretty deep to get that stratification so the sunlight doesn't reach the bottom, so you get a little bit cooler temperatures down at the bottom as well.
Maybe time for one more question.
What kind of plants are the ones that you planted by Rockfish, like the ones in the tubes?
Oh boy. We're gonna have to ask Anhold, so he is the landscape architect on this. Specifically for the ones along the stream banks, we plant a lot of black willows and a lot of tubeling or live stakes that like to be in water pretty consistently, that are very rooty. In the actual floodplain itself, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. We got willow oaks, there's probably some maples.
Sycamore.
Yeah, we got sycamores out there again, just any of our native hardwoods that we have going out there. I can find our vegetation schedule that has that whole list that he came up with, if you're interested in seeing all of those, but it has Rockfish Run and South River Preserve all together.
I will get that up on our website for the project. I've had a lot of questions about that, and I can just present you a list of the different species that are located within the project. So just be on the lookout for that in the next couple of weeks. I'll make sure it gets in there.
All right, well, join me one more time in thanking Jessica for the talk tonight.